Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, you want to start with that?
Here we go, exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with the Smoky Bar.
No. It's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I botch it.
You're on.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Wisdom Check, we think.
Season
I am
2.
Dustin. Season 2, yes. Season 2 kicking off tonight. We got a new overlay. We got a new intro. We also have a new guest. Our new guest today is Sean Van Damme.
Hey.
Isn't that right? So, close enough. Huh? So I practiced it a couple times. Hey, it's good to see a few people here. We got, I see Matt coming in there from Grim and Perilous. We got Kingfishy here already tonight.
Already complaining about the intro. Yeah.
Already complaining about the intro. I was going to run a poll, but then I realized I had to tweet this thing out everywhere and I didn't get a chance to. So maybe we'll put one up near the end. But if you were with us Saturday, Sean was cool enough to come and run a one shot in his tabletop RPG that he wrote, the Ballad of the Pistolero. Mm-hmm. And that is up on,
there it is,
on our Twitch. And it's where? They put it out there already for us?
Nope. He was holding the book up, showing us all.
Oh, he's got the book. Okay, sorry. No.
You know, I always have
my
it
screen
right
looks a little different at the moment. So
there it is again.
He came, he ran us through that. It was a fantastic time. We had a lot of fun with it, and we think we hope everybody who tuned in and watched had a lot of fun with it as well. But we did get a chance to get a taste for the game, and so we definitely wanted to have him come on Wisdom Check and do a little talk with us tonight and get more in depth about Western games, how these games work, and maybe some of his own design decisions that went into Ballad of the Pistolero. So without any further ado, with me over there is Jeff. Jeff, go ahead and say hi to everybody.
Hey, good to see everyone. It's season 2. I hope we get to show you that intro a few times, so we'll get you that later. I hope you guys had a good New Year's, and we are ready to rock and roll here. So we'll say hello to everyone out.
And again, with us today is Sean. Sean, go ahead and say hi to everybody.
Howdy, everybody. It's good to be here. So I'm excited. Season
Awesome.
2.
Season 2. So good.
So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your history with just TTRPGs in general. How far back do you go in your gaming career?
I started, I dabbled right at the beginning of 3rd edition. A friend of mine threw Baldur's Gate 2 at me, and he was like, "Oh my god, you have to play this game. It's fucking amazing." And I did. And, 3 hours later after I created a character, I was like, okay, I'm going to play this. And so I did that, and that was right when 3rd came out. So I picked all those books up, and I read them, kind of understood what was going on. And I played 3 sessions, and then kind of went back to Diablo. But then about 6-7 years ago, my wife started listening to Critical Hit.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, we're going to play D&D. We're doing it. And so we invited a bunch of people over thinking 5 would show up. And 10 people showed up.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And we started playing.
That's a big party.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we were playing this pirate game. And then And then we moved to the Caribbean when she went to vet school, and I was like, I need to play D&D. I want to play D&D. So I started a bunch of D&D groups there, and that was right when 5th edition had come out. So I was like, new edition, we're doing it. And then I've just been on this train ever since.
So big crowd of gamers down there in the Caribbean?
It grew very quickly. I put out a Facebook group. I was like, who wants to play D&D? I was like, like 5 people will say I'm interested. And that night, like 20 people were like, yes, let's play D&D. I was like, oh God.
Holy shit. That's amazing. You would think, that beautiful of an area, that nice of weather, people be outside all the time. You wouldn't have us nerds holding it up on the inside.
Well, everything is sort of outside, even inside. So
true. That's true.
Well, I was gonna imagine that they're not playing in a basement somewhere, right?
No. When you play at night, so it's already dark, and you're not at the beach, and we couldn't go to the beach every night.
Fair
just
enough.
Most nights,
I guess.
So when you were saying that you played a pirate game, right? So
yes,
that's already kind of sticking with the theme there, with your aquaticness.
Yeah, that first game was pirates.
Now, how was it? Was it just playing the game as is as pirates, or was there like rule systems at play that were kind of influencing that at all? Or
it was just as is third edition. I guess it was 3.5, but we were just captured by pirates, and then we got sucked into their pirate life. It opened. It opened. We were tied to the mast. I made a perception check. I got a 3.
Oh,
I learned
nice.
I was on a boat, so I yelled, "I'm on a boat." And that became literally the catchphrase for that fighter his entire career. And now anytime I miss something painfully obvious with my group, I just yell, "I'm on a boat!" And
was that pre
laughs.
or post Lonely Island? I'm on a boat.
Pre, I believe.
That was
pre. About 7
when that
years
came
ago.
out. Did that redefine your "I'm on a boat" thing when that came out? You're like, oh man, I can't use that anymore.
No, still use it.
Still use it.
We talk in references anyway, so it just changed a little.
So did you go out and pick up any books, any specialty books? Because 3.035 was when they were just like, hey, let's pump out as many books as we possibly can into this thing. Like a book for everything, a book for this, a book for this.
Now I think we just had the Monster Manual, the Player's Handbook, and the DMG.
Books and
and then I had an app for character creation on my phone, and that was it. I wasn't running that game, so I was just a player. We just kind of had imagination, because the first DM in our group was my wife, so I had to take over.
So did you then hit a point where 4th ed came out and you hit the wall like everyone else, and you were like, man, I gotta find somewhere else to go? Or did you like 4th ed? Or
I didn't love 4th edition at first, and now that I've played a lot of 5 and I look back at 4th, and especially as a designer, I see a lot of really cool stuff that was in 4e.
Mm-hmm.
Just some of the ways it was implemented was a little weird. It's too much combat, and it's a great tactical squad-based combat game.
Absolutely.
It's not the best D&D game. That said, skill challenges are amazing, and they should come back.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're solid.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, what I liked about
really
4E was the
wish they had
clarity
skipped this silly.
Yeah, I like the clarity of the system. The way that the rules were laid out. You knew exactly what something did. You knew exactly how it interacted with everything else. There wasn't any this weird fiddly crap where you're like, well, but in the description it says it's 10% fluffy. What the hell is that?
Suggesting that 4th ed might have all been written by the same people and not by everybody. From everything kind of made sense.
Well, what's interesting? Oh, go ahead.
And you could run a monster from 4th edition without really any thought, because you would look at the stat block and you're like, it says it does this on these conditions, it does this on here, when it's bloody it does this, and the monsters were really cool the way they ran, and you could run them without a lot of planning thought. The rules did a lot of that work for you, which was really cool.
Yeah, I do like some of those elements there. And it's interesting to see that the people who designed 4th ed, the actual same game designers, were on 4th ed and 5th ed.
Yeah.
So like a lot of times people I think would look at that and say like, oh, those have to be completely different teams, but it's legit the same person.
I think 5th Ed looks like a game that was put together by people who got a lot of feedback from 4th Ed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, so here's the stuff we'll try to keep. Here's the stuff we're going to bring back from the editions that were previous to this that people and try to make it all kind of fit into one game.
Also, you can tell one game was rigorously play tested over years, and the other one kind of they were learning. Like they finally had 4th working right and how they wanted it by the end, but by then it was too late.
They hemorrhaged too many people. And it's an important thing to learn from, I guess. If you have this massive experience where people have this big fissure in the gamer community and everything over a rule set, it's really interesting to come up in those days and say, here's the sorts of design decisions that have major impacts. What was it about this that really pushed people one way or the other? And I think for me, if I was sitting down making a game, that would be really helpful to have as an example, to look back at and say like, well, I like this, but the way they implemented it or the way they rolled it out, whatever it was, something didn't go right.
Yeah.
Did you find that to be helpful for you?
A little, because it's like, all right, so I know I need to do kind of a test and kind of feel what I think people are into when you start creating, as opposed to trying to change everything so drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of feel out your audience a little better.
Well, if there's anything we know about gamers, they hate change.
They do. And I think a lot of the tabletop gamers didn't want a game that felt like Warcraft at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of people. I think the biggest failure, we've talked about it in the 4th Ed discussion, was that it just didn't do enough to spell out the fluff of what was going on. And, generally speaking, when you're putting together a rule system, a lot of the rule book does go around combat or how to circumvent combat with skills. Generally the role playing doesn't get systemized. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe that's the big problem of 4th E. Was it just that they didn't lay it out there and give like the soft edges to everything? Make it very crystal clear that you can, actually still role play. It should be obvious.
Yeah, it was a hard rule book. Like the player's handbook was just hard to get through. And I think that was the thing. Like I never actually read the player's handbook. Like I tried and I kept bouncing off of it. And then I just used the D&D Insider tools. And I was like, all right, I can build my character. I roughly know how this rolls. And I just played because I never DM'd that system. So
did you DM a lot in 3.5? I know you said you started
a teeny bit. A majority of my DM experience is in 5th edition. That's where no one else was able to DM. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it. Let's go.
Well, what we find a lot that's interesting is that when people kind of hit that 4th Ed wall, that's when they started discovering a lot of other tabletop role-playing games. I think a vast majority of people flooded to Pathfinder, which is the most common answer. Did you do that as well?
I have bounced off of Pathfinder every time I've looked at it. Because I found 3.5 really too complicated in places. And because I'm a slow reader, so like having to read grapple rules that are, that long, because there's always that one motherfucker who wants to grapple. And it's like, and so when I looked at the Pathfinder rulebook, I was like, this is worse. There is too much crunch. There are too many options. Like I wasn't playing and I was suffering from decision paralysis just looking at their manual. I guess
I can understand that a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, different strokes, I guess.
So at that point in time, then, did you start exploring other TTRPGs? Like, because I met you through the Zweihander community, and that wasn't an option at the time. But did you start going out to Warhammer, to Star Wars, other systems, or
no? Because we played 3.5, and then we moved, and we were like, I was off for like a year of playing, and then our group back in the States just switched to 4, and they really liked it because they're very video game oriented people. So 4th edition, they were the target audience for 4th edition. They were like, we get this. We like combat. raw. And then when I got back in, 5 had just come out. So I was like, cool, 5th edition. I love this. I understand it. It's new. It's not terribly crunchy. And then as I just started playing more, I started to kind of branch out and look at other systems.
Now, let me ask you this. As someone who is a writer, because obviously at some point you picked up writing, and we'll ask you a little more about when you got started there, but does the amount of crunch in a system give you a certain amount of fear of trying to write for that system?
Yeah, because you have to learn the system and you have to be comfortable with it to write for it. Because your adventures aren't just novels with stat blocks. Which, if you look like a Call of Cthulhu adventure, it's a short story with a stat block or two.
Right.
And so you have to know the system, and if the system is too big and too scary, you're like, I don't have time to learn the system before I sit down and write something for it.
Yeah.
So and then if there's too many rules, you get overwhelmed. The inspiration doesn't flow right because you're just being bombarded by nonsense.
So did you start writing in 3.5? Obviously you DM'd a little, so you probably didn't start writing in 3.5. You probably were writing in 5th ed then?
Started writing in 5th for campaign adventure stuff.
Very cool.
On the DM's Guild?
Yeah. I've got a couple of things on the DM's Guild. I've got a Kobold adventure and a Barovia adventure because Curse of Strahd is awesome, and Barovia is a great place to send your lovely friends to, and then some character stuff. And then I moved over to Zweihander because it was a less crowded community, and the book just grabbed me by the throat and was like, play me. So
yeah, I can understand that. So
yeah,
that 700-page book didn't scare me, but Pathfinder did.
So what is it about the Zweihander's 700 pages of book that doesn't intimidate? Like, is it
was easier to read?
Yeah, just the way it's laid out, the way it's written in terms of like sentence structure, or is it the rules themselves?
It's a bit the rules themselves because they're not overly fiddly. Like the rules aren't complicated. It's just a ton of options. Whereas you look at Pathfinder, there's like 5 different types of AC. There was so much, like 100 feet, 200 feet. It was a lot. Like you could skip through tons of this Zweihander book. You're like, all right, cool. I learned character creation. Oh, cool. Here's all the professions. All right. Now I'm looking at game mastery. And so you didn't have to digest as much to feel comfortable with the game.
Well, and it's 700 pages. That includes a bestiary, an adventure in the back of the book, and then the rule set. So you're getting 3 books in one. If you look at just the rule sections of that book, it's like 300 pages. It's not
because I don't have it up here with me. But like the player's handbook is only
thing, but
I've got the new one. I've got the print on demand one. No, I don't have the player's handbook. The new one that just came out in December is only like 300 pages, 350.
And
it's
which
just
for a
all
gaming book's pretty slim. Yeah,
and it's just all the player-facing stuff from the core rule book.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of movement towards these kind of lighter games. Do you find that you're running shorter campaigns, or are you finding shorter 4 or 5 game sessions in a row, or like one shots?
Our campaigns tend to run shorter. Like the longest one that my gaming groups we've ever really run to completion, I think, was a year and a half, with one that my friend ran, and then I ran one that was like 6 months. I think our Curse of Strahd one took about 6 months if you take out the really long break that we took in the middle. So they tend to run shorter. I've never been in one of those 10 years later we're still playing these characters kind of games.
How frequently are you playing, or is it's like
we play once a week?
Once a week, okay.
So
you're getting quite a few games in there.
That's a lot of game sessions. I mean,
I'm kind of poking this way because to me, like a rules light system holds my attention for a much shorter period of time. So like for a one shot or like just a couple game series where like I'm not really heavily invested, sure, rules light's fun. Whereas I think if I was playing a game for the long haul, I think that would really lose me pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can see that.
You need, because a rules light system doesn't have a ton of variety. It's got its one or two reward loops that it rolls in, and then that's all it's got. Whereas a bigger system, you've got a bunch of chases and my brain is failing, but you've got a lot more systems built in that you the DM have options to go to with structure immediately, as opposed to having to kind of create that structure. And so I think a rules light system benefits from knowing that it's best in small campaigns and then tailoring itself to that, whether it's like it doesn't have a long wheel of character rollout development, or it kills its characters quickly, or it's it works better in small doses.
And this is something we talked about on Saturday a little bit. You were saying that your particular game that you're putting out here, if we want to show that lovely book again, is intended more for a kind of a short run, and by design, it was kind of leading towards that direction. Now, were there particular design elements at play that are, putting in that spot, or is that just kind of the nature of the source material, or something else?
It kind of came about as I was building the system. I was realizing that I was building something rules light, and I was like, okay. And I was looking at a lot of Westerns. They always they have very definite ends, and they're never very long. And I was like, well, let's build a system that's easy, quick, simple, and then it's something you play between campaigns, or something you can just pick up quickly. Because I think sometimes a lot of what scares people about trying new systems is they end up with a stack of 700-page books. Excuse me. And no one wants to, someone has to take the hit and learn that and then teach the rest of the group. And people are slower to do that, which is, and then they stick with D&D because it's what they know. Not that that's a bad thing.
Right.
So you hand them a 44-page book and they can learn it. And you can roll quickly. And as soon as you get people learning new games, 1, 2, 3, then they're less afraid of the 700-page monster books. And it's good, because we don't want those to just sit on our shelves and gather dust.
Right. For sure. Yeah,
so you consider the shorter rules light ones kind of like your gateway drug to the like, this is something you get a new player to sit down and play once, and if they like it, then you bust out the 700-page book. Well, if you like that one, my friend, chew on this for the next 3 months.
Right, yeah, it's your gateway drugs. And I think we need, as an industry, more gateway drugs, because we've got 5e, which has got great new player tools, because the rules are free online. Both the starter kits are amazing, and they're very new player friendly, but still fun for old players. And we just don't have enough small, easy to digest systems and games.
Yeah, it seems like the market is there are a lot of these light games that are out there, but they're just not the big publishers.
Yeah.
So when you look at the market and you say, hey, get into tabletop role playing, they do a Google search, and the first things they see are these more crunchy systems that are, more ubiquitous in the world. Because, if you go to conventions, it seems like every counter you look at is a rules light, game, or like an old school throwback, or, something of those likes. So there are a lot out there.
And even when you get something rules light, sometimes they try to pull it into so many different genres that then the book still balloons and explodes. Because I need to support Westerns, and then sci-fi, and then fantasy, and then pulp, novel stuff. We played a game of Cypher, which is another really cool system, but it has so many different genres that the book got big. And it was this would have been, you could have small booked it, or had just one core book, and then they try to do a lot.
And it's safe to say that just whether you like systems that are heavier crunch or lighter crunch, like that doesn't mean you're going to like every light system.
Yeah.
Like just because you liked one, that's why there is a whole plethora of these different styles of games out there, because you can keep searching till you find one that really grabs you, like the way that the rules are written or the way they play out, like depending on what you really want out of a game or what story you want to tell. So.
Yeah. Because when I sit down to tell a story or I kind of figure out the beginning of a campaign, I always say to myself, well, what story do I want to tell? And then I go, well, what system is going to facilitate this the best? Because if I want to tell a, knockdown, drag out, muddy, low fantasy story, I'm not going to pick up D&D.
Any edition.
Yeah, correct.
But if I want to have the characters start, scrappy and then become big damn heroes and save the world, I mean, you can goddamn bet I'm going to plop down 5th edition and we're going to roll, because that's big damn heroes with swords.
Right.
Yeah. And me and Jeff were just having kind of a sidebar conversation after our one shot the other night. Just what a difference switching from health levels to hit points makes in that entire conversation, whether your rule's light or heavy. Just hit points alone. The moment you see hit points in a pool of them, you're like, these characters are epic. Like, it just is almost guaranteed. Like, so
which brings us some interesting discussion points, because I was actually wanting to dig into what elements of your system kind of creates the Western vibe in your mind.
Yeah.
I think what creates the Western vibe is, as you look at the book, just the language it's written in, and then the professions, and then kind of it being scrappy gives it that kind of, we're in the West, because a lot of the rules are very similar to other systems. It's D100s, there's health levels, there's the equivalent of mana, which is the moxie points. So like that, it's all about how you present it, really, that gives it that feel.
Gotcha.
Because mechanics are mechanics. Because I can take the mechanics from almost any game and make them something else with enough work. And under the hood, it's still the same car.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, we were having a discussion.
The paint you put on it.
Yeah, we were having a discussion a little bit afterwards, talking about, obviously our game was pretty slapsticky as a result of the players. But I was kind of curious what tone the game was intended to have, if it was intended to have a specific tone. Because like when I think of Westerns, in my mind, I go straight to like stuff like Tombstone. Whereas when we polled the other guys, they immediately went to more like, Three Amigos and like kind of funny, Western style themes. And my head didn't go there at all. So like, different people have different idea what they're getting into.
Yeah. When I was initially building the rules, I was like, all right, I want the combat to be scary and violent and bloody, and it always to kind of, like, my touchstone was the Wild Bunch. And then as I was going further, it kind of pulled back a bit, and for a little bit it was Westworld, but that's because it was on the TV at the time.
Good show.
And then, and then it was like, as I was playing, and I was like, people like Westerns, but they don't always take them as seriously as Westerns take themselves. Right. So people always kind of play a little sillier, a little more. It's a good excuse to be very flamboyant a lot of times.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I'm going to put on a silly accent, and I got a hat, and they play to the sillier tropes. And so I kind of worked towards that. I added a little more humor into the book, and I was like,
so that was
just roll to that. Yeah.
Well, just the spelling of words like reading, writing, arithmetic, when those are your skills, they're not written out as the full words.
Yeah.
They're written in that like almost like kind of hickish accent sort of way that, it is that kind of play on those words, even just in the actual skill description.
Yeah, because as I was writing the book, once I kind of got the systems down, there's two narrators. There's Jed and Zeke, who are kind of explaining the rules to you. So a lot of it's written in that kind of vernacular voice. Anytime I could do a description in narrative as opposed to in a very cut and dry, well, then here you play 5 Moxie and you get... It's like, no, let me just roll it out and, if you want to read it in that Western silly voice, it'll work. It's, it rolls off the tongue. And it's a lot of fun to read, and it gets you really in the mode real quick.
Gotcha. I'm kind of looking over chat here. We got God2988 is wanting to interject some opinion here, but I'm not quite picking up what they are saying. Maybe they can elaborate a little bit more there. They're saying that stuff we're saying is easy. Oh, saying is very difficult to comprehend and very biased. Is there anything we can kind of clear up?
Put questions in chat. We'll definitely answer them for you there, God.
Yeah.
No, you can't pitch into the actual stream because of overlays and stuff, man. If that's what you're wanting, sorry, bud. But
if you got a question, fire it up there.
If you have a question, you fire them there in the chat, and we answer them all the time. So
yeah.
But this is an opinion show. It is literally us talking about our opinions about systems and games and problems that come up. So if you're not into opinions, this is probably not the place for you. But if you got opinions you want to share, bring them on.
His game system, I can tell you, somebody's played it, like who looked through the book and got to play in one shot, the other day, is that if you wanted to run like a super serious Tombstone style game, like you totally can with those rules.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that says you can't. And in fact, if you think about like some of the shootouts, the hit point system and the way that some of those work, like you could very definitely have longer shootouts. Whereas if you wanted a game to be, you get shot once and you're dead, you're not probably going to get that with this system necessarily. You're going to live through a shot or two for sure,
Right, because we had, I had like the low level bad guys were what you guys were facing mostly. Mm-hmm. So the way the bad guys work is they have thresholds and then how many hits they can take. So like you guys were fighting guys with a 210 threshold, so they could take, each time they got hit, as long as you did 10 damage, it counted against how many hits they had. And so like a lot of them had like 2 to 3 hits at 10 damage. And so they go down quickly, and bigger bad guys, or even just one set of exploding dice can really mess your day up. And
sure.
Like one of the first play tests, someone lost like 2/3 of their hit points in one shot.
Wow!
So they got shot, and then there were 2 exploding 10s, and they were like, "What? I'm almost dead." And I'm like, "Yeah, guns hurt."
Yeah,
they do for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because that was the one criticism I may have had with the system, is that for me, when I think of Western, I wanted to think of the build up to a gunfight and worry about, the severity of that. So like that forces more role play, in my opinion. You're dancing around it, you're doing more politicking, you're doing more investigation instead of like kicking in the door and just shooting. And like with the hit points, I always feel like you just have this massive sponge. And I don't know, like with Dungeons and Dragons, it always feels like, you're getting stabbed like 500 times, and then, that's 501st time. That one counted,
Yeah.
And it wasn't that bad with this one because he has kind of a much smaller pool. But I still, my character got shot in the one shot that we played, and I didn't feel any consequence from that whenever I was going through it. And I was wondering if that was just the nature of the one shot we were playing, or if that was something we didn't come up to, or is that just part of it?
A bit of the nature of being a one shot. And I definitely didn't put strong enough bad guys against you, so they were missing. You guys kind of steamrolled through them. But so stamina it comes back a lot slower. So like if you were in a longer session or over 1 or 2 sessions, you would never pop back to full. It would take you a lot longer to return to full. Okay. And you guys also rolled very well.
Yeah, I did roll.
Character creation. So I've had nights where players, they walk into a fight and then they just kind of walk out and they're like, that was really easy. And then other sessions where they just got obliterated. So it's a little swingy based on how they roll and how everyone rolls, because exploding dice can be hard to balance for.
Oh, yeah, exploding dice are very difficult. Yeah.
They go all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few of our games as Zweihander recently, as you've watched, like we've had some exploding dice that have caused some real serious injuries to some characters. And And when a system, is like that, where they can, very quickly spend like points and stuff to make those things explode, things of that nature. So you're not dealing with that level of exploding in your game because you don't have any way to really force that, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I got distracted by chat. What were you saying?
Yeah, that's all
Me
right.
too. Sorry about that. I had to take care of some shenanigans in the chat there. The exploding dice, I think, is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's a very swingy the way you when you sit down to try to balance it out a bit. I'm still fine tuning really how where the bad guys really fit and what's their good range. I'm still trying to really get a good handle on how I want to write adventures for Pistolero.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that too. When you're writing a system, it doesn't necessarily have to be symmetric. Do the rules for players and the other side have to be the same? Because in this case, exploding dice creates a lot of uncertainty from the DM side of things, or GM in this case.
Yeah.
And you can narrator, perfect. So you can come up with the mathematics of the system, and like you can crunch it out and you can say, okay, these exploding dice contribute this much more to every roll, but the effect is very serious when it pops in. Wow. Okay. Good job,
Second Troll of the Night. I actually got that one. So
excellent. Good quick shot there.
I was waiting for the other guy to act up, and he finally did. So
yeah. Okay. Well, every once in a while we have to clean up the chat, folks.
Now then we got to. So
it's the internet.
We appreciate all the real fans out there. Keep the chat going.
Yeah, just go ahead and chat up and just get that stuff off the screen. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But at any rate, sorry about that. So the kind of the interesting thing is, I think you can have kind of asymmetric rule systems, and then that kind of gets rid of that part of it. It makes it a little easier because the exploding systems are great as a player. It feels good.
Yeah.
Like you have that like moment of like, holy shit, I did something awesome. But I don't think it translates the opposite way. Like I think when somebody is on the DM side or the narrator side and they roll that big fatty auto kill, you just kind of walk away going like,
Yeah. It's and that's why I always roll sometimes behind a screen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to kill your characters. It's the DM, but I do like the players knowing that there is that chance that
absolutely
that it could go poorly very quickly. But the players are a little more hardy than the bad guys. So
for me as a player,
I feel like the moment that's off the table, that I lose complete interest in the game. The moment I don't feel like I can die.
Yeah.
Like for me, the whole thing just becomes, well, let's just write a story then. Like I'll send you a chapter, you send me a chapter. We're clearly not killing each other. Like to me, then don't roll dice at all. Just write a story.
I like the ability to know, because it's a level of trust. You have to trust that your DM's not going to just capriciously kill you.
Right.
While at the same time knowing that it can happen. And that's like, as a DM, it feels bad sometimes when you accidentally kill a character, or because just everyone misinterpreted something, or you were rolling in the open and the dice and that happens especially at like lower levels. And
low levels are deadly.
Yeah.
I think the important part, and we touched on this in an old episode where we were talking about character death, is that for me personally, it comes down to, did I feel like I had choice? Is my death in some way due to something I had control over?
Yeah.
Did I make a stupid decision and I died? Okay, I'm okay with that. Did I do everything exactly right and then the dice just fucked me? Like, that feels a little shitty,
Yeah.
So it's,
Because I've definitely had moments where I've miscommunicated to a player and they've died and I felt bad. And then we have that discussion. Well, do you want to, do we want to bring your character back? Do we want to do like a little quest? How are you feeling? Because definitely this was, a miscommunication on what was going on. And then other times it's just like, I gave you guys outs and you didn't take them.
Right.
And other times all player and DM walk down a path together where the total party kill is coming and you can't stop it. Like
Right.
there was one game we were playing, the party rolled up against a ghost. The ghost possessed someone, as they do,
Brutal.
and then the players saw this as an option to kind of have some light PvP. But we were all kind of rolling in the open, and I was letting them roll their own dice. I didn't take control of the character completely who was in the ghost.
Mhm.
I still let the players roll.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden someone dropped, and then the ghost took someone else over, and then someone dropped.
Mhm.
And it was all of a sudden uh-oh.
Yeah.
The cleric didn't turn undead. And so they were
wow.
fighting against each other while the ghost kept popping into places. And
Oh man.
and then the death spiral started, and
Yeah, once the domino falls, it starts going quick.
yeah, and since everything was being done in the open, I had ceded enough control that I couldn't, secretly roll it back. I was like, well, fuck, here's a TBK. It's a fun story now.
Yeah,
Well, we can definitely touch on this particular issue of rolling behind a screen and not, but I did want to get Air Laser's question before, because she paid some currency in here to get it.
That's right.
So she was asking when you made your game.
I started writing it last summer. On a kind of a lark. We were in another Discord. We were lamenting, one of the people was lamenting that there wasn't a Western game that wasn't weird or wasn't like a little bolt-on to another system. Because he was looking for, I want just a Western game that's just a Western. No magic, no elves, no
Right. Yeah.
weird nonsense. And so I banged out a little system, and then I set it aside, and then some other projects fell through, and then I was like, well, I'll come back to this for a few days. And then 4 weeks of writing, I was like, well, fuck, I've got a thing. And so I got some art, and I was like, well, I'll try a Kickstarter. Why not? The worst that can happen is I'm a few $100s in the hole for some art, and it doesn't work. And then, oh no, I've bought art, heavens. And
Yeah. Who knows who knows when you'll ever decide to use it again, right? But I mean, you still have it, so it's
Hang it on the wall,
Yeah, and then I managed that by the skin of its teeth, succeeded, and then I was like, all right, so we've got a thing. Now we have to make it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Congrats on that, by the way. It's a big undertaking.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to doing something big this year. So what that'll be, I don't know yet.
I was gonna say,
can we get a little scoop here on what you got in store, or are you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the big project for 2020 is going to be. I've still got some dominoes that need to set up so I can really forward plan for the year.
Gotcha. Well, so let's, I think that answers the question. So let's go ahead and jump back to that, because we were talking about the TPK situation, and
Yeah,
a lot of that you said came
about
from.
to say that I don't ever shy away from it as a DM. It's just my personal DM style. I do not shy away from character death or TPK at all. I never use a screen. I just roll. The rolls are the rolls. The damage, the damage. You play it, and then when all is said and done, if you've got to role play something out, you role play something out.
Yeah.
I'm not a big dice fudger in that sense. I don't like to pull one back with the false victory for the group that they don't know about. I'd rather them either win or lose and learn from it, and then,
I think that's a legitimate position to be on. I think there's also some legitimacy to, if you see a scene unfolding in a way that is unsatisfying for everyone at the table, including yourself, you need to have the ability to fix that.
Yeah.
I do understand the idea that you want to have things be just by the dice, and if you have dice, you should use the dice. But at the same time, we're here at the table to have fun, and if it's not going to be fun, why do it?
Because here's the good thing: as a DM or GM or whatever you want to call yourself,
narrator,
you have near 75-80% control of what happens in a scene.
Yeah.
The players are doing their thing, but you can bring in more enemies if you need it. You can have enemies run. You can have the big bad guy stop and start monologuing. You have all the control in the world to stop things from getting to a point you don't need it to get to. The only thing that I always advise people is, and especially in these kind of situations, is don't roll a die unless you're okay with both outcomes.
Yeah.
Don't roll it. Narrate it. Role play it. Don't roll a damn die if you don't want both outcomes as possibilities. Just don't. Just don't leave it up to that. Just go with it. Go with whatever you feel is best then, and just role play it. You don't have to roll a die.
Yeah, and that's hard for sometimes for newer DMs and even more experienced ones who are just like, oh, I'm rolling now, is to know, like, well, no, maybe I don't need to roll this. I can just say what's happening.
Exactly.
And just kind of move that way.
Yeah, so long as I think the only issue with that is if the players feel like they don't have agency. Like
right.
if a DM or a storyteller, narrator, or whatever decides to just script what the scene is doing and telling them what their characters are doing to some degree or what they didn't do as a result of the time elapsing, like that rubs people wrong. But I think you're right. If you don't want to see something come up to chance, don't interject chance.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you have to take away agency for a small scene, a role played out scene, and then give it back to them in a different situation, the guy throws them in jail. Some other thing happens. They're you got that ability to improv as a DM and rework what you thought was your encounter into something else. Like you just do those things, and then you give the agency right back to them. Like to me, that's just the same as I would rather take the agency away and then give it back than have an opportunity to challenge the integrity of the dice itself. Because at that point, you never get that trust back. Never.
Yeah, and sometimes if you need to take it away for a second, if you let the player know why, like you can't hurt this thing, or it, or anything that's like you just take it and then you just slide it and you give it back, but you tell them why. They're usually less resistant to it. Because you're just kind of like, let me borrow your agency. All right, here. And just kind of turn you in a direction that will work better for you. And trust me that I know what's going on under the hood because I can see everything.
Right. Now, one of the comments in the chat here was saying something kind of tangentially here, but never roll a die for inter-party conflict, especially charisma rolls. RP that, and that's because in their game, and Air Laser's game, they had some. Well, they're kind of newer gamers, and they're in their kind of like infancy of trying to pick up new skills as gamers, and ran into a lot of the things we all ran into. Oh yeah. And among those is this constant thing that always seems to come up is there's always the player that wants to steal from some other player. There's always one player that wants to be evil and backstab the other guy while they're sleeping. And there's always somebody who wants to get their way in the party and wants to just roll a die and make it happen. Yeah. And it doesn't feel good. So no. It takes really advanced players for that to work, and only if everyone is on board and agrees before the scene unfolds.
Yeah. And we've seen the opposite happen too, where you have somebody who's trying to play something they're not. And then, and we would see this in Larp. Larp is my number one go-to for where this would happen. We're going to talk about Larp in a couple of weeks. We have a guest coming on. We're going to talk about this. We'll get into this more. We'll save it. But what I've got to say is that when somebody's trying to play something they're not, you have to sometimes let the die roll come back in to facilitate the fact that they're not that thing. And you want people to grow as people and try new characters and new character concepts. So like if you're not particularly smooth, but your character's supposed to be, it feels really let down that you can't play that character because you can't make the die roll at his 18 charisma instead of your human 12 that you probably are rolling with or whatever, so I get both sides of it. I really do.
Yeah. You have to know when to hold them and RP them and roll them. Right. Because sometimes you're like, oh, I'm playing that suave bard, but you're not, and so sometimes let the dice work for when you're playing against the NPCs, right? But I don't know, for inter-party conflicts, sometimes it always feels hollow when you're like, well, I rolled against, at that point, play a game that's not cooperative.
Yeah, and that's a weird dynamic in a game. Like, it is realistic, I guess, but when you're sitting down to play a TTRPG, you're playing a game based around a party. It's not LARP. It's not a like cutthroat. Let's get at each other and let's take every advantage we can. It's your group of people who have agreed to get together and do something together. So play that way,
Yeah, and parties can bicker and have conflict, but it shouldn't come down to, well, I'm going to try to convince him and I'm going to roll charisma, or I'm stealing from, don't steal from your party members. It never works out right. because someone always ends up feeling shitty about it.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think sometimes with some newer games you might get that now and then, but I think for the most part, like, I think people lose that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's one of the first things that goes pretty quickly, because if you really are enjoying the game, like, I think where you get it the most is when people are first picking it up and they're not that serious about the game, so they just are kind of seeing what they can and can't get away with. They're filling their boundaries, and then they're like, that classic, well, this is what my character would do sort of excuse that comes back up every now and then.
I hate that phrase so much. Well, that's what my character would do.
Felt like my eyes about rolled back in my head.
It's like, well, don't roll those characters. They're antithetical to playing a game cooperatively.
Yeah, they're toxic as hell.
I'm just true neutral. It's like, no, you're being an asshole or lazy, or you just aren't. You're not wanting to play with everyone, and it's the same. The people who are like, well, I want to be the rules lawyer, so I'm going to roll lawful good, and don't use alignment as an excuse to be a dick.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Is what it comes down to, because I think too often people stick way too hard to those alignment charts. They're like, but it says I'm true neutral, which means I don't care. It's like, no, there are things you care about, and that's not saying you can just be a douche.
Chaotic neutral does seem to attract a lot of douche.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
That brings us to an element of your game, actually. One of the things that was kind of interesting at the start was that we got to pick our color of hat, which is very Western.
Yeah.
For those of you guys who aren't avid Western people, there's the black hats, the white hats, and in this case, we also have brown hats. And when you watch the Westerns, people wearing white hats are good guys. People wearing black hats are bad guys, period.
Yeah.
It's a very cut and dry world for most Westerns. Now, with the interjection of the brown hat, obviously, there is some wiggle room that's interplayed. Now, is that intentional across the board, or is that just kind of to open up just an option? Is that a tone setter?
It was just to give the option of someone who doesn't want to play like I'm a good guy or I'm a bad guy, who's just like the rancher who's just out in the West, who's not necessarily as attached to the diametric good bad scales. There's always the people in the middle who just aren't who aren't I'm bad, I'm good.
Yeah, just getting by. Now, do you feel like that's like the hat is a really important aspect of the game, or just kind of an icing on the cake kind of thing?
I think it's icing on the cake, because I think we give alignment too much of our mental space, because people are like, well, I'm so worried about what my alignment is, and am I playing to my alignment? And we see all these charts. Well, the alignment of these fictional characters, alignment is not a good gauge of a lot of things in a lot of ways. Play your character, build a person. You can't just put everyone into 9 boxes. Right. And so it is it's an icing on the cake. Because I was like, well, I wanted some kind of light morality alignment-ish system. Because it's a good gauge where you can quickly go, I have a black hat, so I'm going to give whiskey to this kid. Right. And I stole it from Westworld. And I was just like, that is so elegant to just, before you walk into the park, you choose your hat. And then I was like, that's really cool. And then I was like, well, I'm going to put a brown hat in there for that middle ground. And then I was like, that's cool. That's all we need for alignment. We don't need hundreds of pages and hours and hours and hours of arguments over 9 boxes that someone in the 70s came up with.
Yeah. Now, and on our playthrough, obviously, it's a one-shot, so we didn't get to explore everything. But were there any other things that the alignment or the hat impacts in the game other than just a flavor?
It's just flavor.
Okay.
It's just a small outward representation of what your character might be about.
Yeah. Like there's no rules or skills that are like black hat only or detect hat color or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We're inadvertently kind of touching base on our first ever episode of season 1, and Dustin and I argued over alignment.
Actually, we touched on both bases of episode 1, alignment and character death. We covered them both right there in this one as well.
See, it's a light reset of the season.
It is. It is turned into a light reset. I mean, it was not intended, but here we are.
It happens.
They're good topics,
because those always come up.
Mm-hmm. So, these are important nuts and bolts issues that come up, like how you deal with characters, what you push. Now, one of the things I saw on the character sheet that was on there that was pretty helpful, I think, for particularly new players, is you had kind of a Mad Libs kind of fill-in part at the bottom.
Right. Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm so-and-so, I'm from this place, I know these people, I'm concerned about this, blah, 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 blah. So, like, it helps you kind of quickly flesh out a concept. How much work did you put in that? Like, what were the key parts you think are like the most important from there?
I knew that I wanted an easy way for people to kind of structure their backstory. So I was like, well, you need to know, who you are, but like, it's important because everyone in the West is from somewhere else. So I was like, all right, so where are you from? Why are you here? What are your hopes and your dreams? And that kind of aspirational, manifest destiny Americana feel. So I was like, all right, so I had written a bunch of those up, and I was like, but are people going to interact with them? Or are they just going to go, oh, it's some tables and I'm going to ignore it? I was like, well, if I put it in this Mad Lib, then it gives it some structure. And so I came up with that. I wrote it down. I was real excited about it. I was going to go on Twitter and share it. And then fucking Daniel from Zweihander popped his up the same day. I was like,
well, there's no new ideas under the sun, but there are good ideas, and when people are converging on the same thing, it means you did something right.
And I was like, oh, because I pulled so much from Zweihander. I was like, now it looks like I stole that too. And I was like, but I came up with that one.
Well, let's ask the chat about this. Like, this is one of the things I did like about 5th edition is that they interjected those ideals, bonds, flaws, that kind of stuff, personality traits. And this is another example of that. This is also something the World of Darkness did a lot of, kind of pushing out to nature, demeanor, coming up with these little short synopsis of your character concept. Or I think in the later ones, they did something called touchstones, I think is what they're called. And
I don't know if I'm familiar with that part of it. But
they actually had mechanical effects on you. So like if you're dealing with something that was related to something you'd written into your character background as important, you got bonuses. Or if something was affecting you in the inverse.
Did that replace merit and flaws, just for my own knowledge? Or was that still a separate thing?
I don't know the system well enough to tell you.
Flaws, but you don't know for sure? Okay.
I read it the one time. But, it's these sorts of things I think really go a long way to, taking the average beginning player and getting them to that intermediate stage quickly. Is this a whole section of the game that when you read the books, a lot of times it doesn't enter your mind. You're like, oh, I've got a sword. Okay, I've got a gun. Cool, I've got this set of armor. I've got a horse. Let's go. Like, what do I do in this game? Oh, clearly I must be shooting and stabbing whatever that thing is over there. Let's go. And I want more horses. And whenever you see other things kind of tossed in your lap, like think about this. Even if it's just subtle, like just, fill in this one blank, that gets your mind rolling. You're starting to think about it. You're going to come up with something. Maybe after your first session, you come across some events and you think, I got to flesh this out more. Why did that go that way?
It's such a great tool for new players, or if you're not quite sure what you want your character to be, you can just sit down and you're like, all right, I've got my background, which I picked because it has mechanical things. And then I'm like, well, let me dig into it. Okay, I've got these. And then you can pull from them. And it's a great starting point. It really reinforces that we're playing an RPG and not just a combat simulator. I normally now, when I create a character, I don't roll their ideals, their flaws, their bonds anymore. But I have in the past. And sometimes when I'm building NPCs or I'm building characters for a one-shot, I'll roll all those things out, because then they're really important, because you can hand someone that sheet and then after a minute of reading, like, okay, I've got an idea of who this is, and I don't have to read a long backstory that a level 1 character probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, I think for 5e, what kind of caught me was the first time I made a 5e character, I went through and I rolled all the bonds and ideals and everything else, and then realized that you really shouldn't roll them. You should just pick the ones that best fit what you're going to do. And then I realized very quickly that those systems don't actually... They help you get your character in mind, but they don't actually do anything mechanically in the game. So it's kind of like alignment in that same asset. Like you go through a lot of time picking them out, writing things in those blurbs, and they take up a good chunk of the sheet, which is kind of cool in a way because it makes you keep those things in your forefront when you're role playing it.
Yeah.
So they gave enough respect to the system to put it there to make you constantly see it and remember it. But at the same time, it does nothing to the other 75% of the sheet, which is just kind of weird that they didn't go that one step further and have like a feedback system where it would do something for you. But at the same time, I totally get why they didn't.
I go back and forth on that. I think
it's just interesting how much time and space they gave it for what it is. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's interesting compared to the old alignment. As you said, 9 boxes, check 1 and move on.
Yeah, I think the problem is once you put and I'll let you talk in a second. I'm sorry about cutting you off there. But I feel like when you put a mechanic to something like a personality trait, that invites min-maxing, right?
Sure.
Like, if you tell me that like being a calligrapher makes me a better swordsman and I'm playing a great swordsman, suddenly I'm going to be a calligrapher. Like, crap. Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that with a game system.
I mean, World of Darkness did. Your nature demeanor gave you power back and stuff. So, I mean, it wasn't terrible, though. Like, you just got them for doing different things. So it was... I'm just surprised there wasn't something feedback as much space as they gave it on the sheet, but it's...
Yeah,
so I went through it was just one of those things. I went through a whole bunch of time dealing with it to find out it didn't really do anything. But so you were going to go ahead and say there, Sean?
Yeah, I think as soon as you put any kind of mechanical thing on backstory and character, it does invite your min-maxers to go, okay, well, I'm going to pick this, that, and they'll end up building the same character over and over again.
Yeah.
And they'll be and then people aren't going to lean into negative character traits. Because, like they say, well, I rolled a low stat. Well, lean into it. It's fun for RP.
Right.
To, play the dumb character or the character who can't talk his way out of a paper bag because you rolled a 6 for your charisma. At the same time, if you put a bunch of negatives on slightly negative bonds or flaws or whatnot, no one's going to pick those.
Right.
And then no one's going to play them. And you're going to mechanically cause a system to not create cool characters. Because then you're not going to want to not have those because they're balanced into the system.
Right.
I'm just surprised they didn't feed into that they didn't have like a hero point system. Still that idea of like an extra point you can gain back every now and then by doing something with one of your bonds or flaws or something.
I think that's what inspiration was supposed to be.
Right.
Because I know I was reading or I was listening to one of the D&D podcasts. They were talking about systems that they put in that they weren't 100% like solidly confident in, and so how they put them throughout the system was kind of tepid. And one of those hit dice and inspiration, and one worked better, and you can see it as you look at later 5e products. They're everywhere because they work really well, and the other one they've kind of completely forgotten about, and that's inspiration. Because who remembers to give inspiration?
Well, I'll tell you who didn't forget: streamers. You go to a lot of streams, you can buy some inspiration for some people. Streamers didn't forget about it. They go, you know what? Here's an unused mechanic that needs to get used more. We need to monetize this thing.
Yeah, they didn't.
Speaking of monetizing,
great for streaming.
Oh man, what happened?
Thanks, Air Laser, for 100 bits. I appreciate it.
Oh, nice.
And we're getting hosted by a number of people.
Oh yeah, 1 and 20 D&D. He is
J Brews as well.
J Brews and Air Laser.
Yeah, so thank you guys
for stopping by.
Appreciate that.
On. Yeah, I think as we move into more streaming as a real big outlet for tabletop games, you're going to see more systems that are designed for the audience and the stream come into your games.
Yeah. How would you recommend people do that with your game?
What I would recommend is...
Well, you were saying luck is one thing that runs out.
Right. I guess
So would you advise the purchasing of luck for characters at a certain bit rate or something?
maybe you could, buy them luck, or maybe
Moxie
or rerolls, anything that like you could lightly have them recharge some stats. Maybe you could.
Like Moxie may be a better choice though, because like the elegant thing about what you do with luck was that it had that your luck runs out, at some point. Like that seemed like a very important narrative component.
Yeah, I would say you could buy Moxie for people. You could buy an exploding die. I think that would be really good, because like the 100 bit, you get you get inspiration. If you, the player, know you have an exploding die sitting in your back pocket because you got cheered, that's a really cool thing, because you're like, oh crap, I need to make this count. Let me throw my explosion in.
Now, one of the really cool things that, if I understood the rule correctly, and it only came up one time, I think, where someone had advantage or disadvantage. And that's something you see purchased a lot in games, is advantage and disadvantage. And you have it in Ballad of the Pistolero as well.
Right.
But because you're using a D100 system, you don't roll the 100 twice like you roll a D20 twice. You just get one extra die, correct?
Correct. And so you're rolling 2 10 spaces, and then you just take the best one or the worst one. So you end up rolling 3 D10s, 2 of them being your 10 space, and then the other one being the ones.
So you roll 3 D10s. You got 3 numbers. You take the 2 best if you have advantage. You take the 2 worst if you have disadvantage.
So I misunderstood that in the game. I
picked up on that. I thought that was really cool. So then I was thinking, like, if you wanted to give someone advantage, you could literally just toss another 10s die in there. Now you got 4. Now you got 5. Like, really up the chances of getting what you need out of that one roll. Like, there's a lot of cool play there that you could do, like with rules.
And one thing I'm toying with is I'm working on, it's the deck of mini tropes. So it's just a deck of Western tropes. And then awesome. So at a certain buy level, you could just buy a draw from the deck. And so the DM's like, all right, so this, whatever I've drawn is sitting here, and it's another thing they can interject, or it either immediately comes in or just to, throw wrenches in the game. Because I think eventually, if you've got the right kind of system and the right kind of players, the audience can really, and you let the audience play in a structured way, it almost becomes like the audience is really throwing things at you and being a co-author of the story.
This is going to be one of those points where I've got to bring up some people in our stream team here, and I don't know if they're still watching, but some of the guys from the Grouch Couch do that with the deck of many things already. And if you haven't watched their show Drunks and Dragons, it is a chaotic ride with that deck sometimes. Like, they had to put it on some timers and stuff. So like what you're talking about, I have seen it in action, and you're 110% correct. Like it does work that way. So if you get that thing put together, it'll definitely be something that you could definitely incorporate, and that would work very, very well. So,
yeah, you've got a lot of people in the chat right now, and we got a lively conversation going. But a lot of you missed out on the intro we did. That's a new intro for the new season, and it was because we kind of had a little hiccup start. So we may replay that for you guys here soon. You guys interested in that? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you are. I know there's at least Air Laser wants to see it because she missed it.
Yeah, we can roll one more time. We'll be right back with Sean here if you guys want to.
It's like 1 minute 20 seconds, so it'll be a little quick.
All right, let's re-roll it for all the people who joined us late today.
Racket.
Clint, take us to the intro.
Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, do you want to start with that?
Here we go, exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with Smoky Bar.
No, it's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More. Yeah.
not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
There it is, a little.
You'll have to let us know
throwback
back there. Try to tie in all the old fun stuff, but spice it up, shorten it up, make it nice. So if you liked it, let us know. If you hate it, let us know. Whatever.
Is a big fan. I'll tell you what, Jeff. Go ahead and start back here with Sean. I forgot where we were at. I'm going to go ahead and fire up a poll here for the chat, and we'll let them vote on how they feel about it.
We were talking about things that you can buy in games, in streaming games, like a deck of many things where you can buy draws or advantage and such.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was toying with one game where it's like a fighter sim, and then the downtime is very soap opera-ish, so like a Battlestar. And there's a game on Kickstarter right now that's basically this, which I forget the name of. But it looks really cool, and I was like, that was my idea. Awesome, guys. And because it's such an original idea, let me just make a Battlestar tabletop game. And
it's so hard to do right, though.
Yeah. But the idea is that all that downtime stuff where it's all the character interaction where it's, it basically turns into a big soap opera. You rope in, like, you have systems that are designed to let your audience interact, kind of turn things. Maybe like the audience can help determine when secrets kind of come out. Oh, okay. And whatnot. Yeah, the Battlestar board game is amazing.
I love that game. It's so good. If you got the right group to play with.
Yeah.
It really sends out that tone.
And so, like, just build in that let the audience kind of control some of the narrative turns. So, like, the characters and the DM all have the story pieces, but don't necessarily know when the dominoes are going to fall. And kind of so it keeps everyone on their toes in a way, and then it really draws your audience in to participating.
So that creates a different dynamic because it's less of you as a player and more as a putting on like a show, like more like talking about TV shows. You're performing. You're an entertainer at that point, which in a lot of ways that's what a streamer is doing. We tend to kind of go back to wanting to be players, but at the end of the day, you are here with an audience wanting to watch you do something for them. So this sort of system would be really interesting. I guess the one technical thing that would have to get over, though, is like the chat delay. Try to keep the dynamic of the conversation flowing organically while you're waiting for the vote or the contribution. So would that be something you would like? You'd want to have initiated ahead of time, and then the players get a sense of what's coming and then do it? Or
I think build in that there's a delay. Like if they vote for a turn that's going to happen or a secret that's going to drop or whatever, know that when they vote for it, there's going to be like a slight delay. Like you're giving the DM a lot of the tools to then drop things shortly in. Like you have to trust that the streamers know where to weave it in correctly. They just have to weave it in. Because I think everyone knows that there's going to be a delay, especially if you're especially for a big stream, you're going to have a huge delay. I think that would be a game that would be impossible to play with an audience the size of like what Critical Role has.
Oh, it would be impossible.
Impossible. But like a smaller stream with like the audience we've got here, it would be really cool because everyone then is playing. Because it goes where yes, the people on stream are kind of performers, but you're also still playing, and then the people in chat are playing. Everyone is then playing the game as opposed to just watching.
Now, are there any shows you're watching currently that are doing things like that?
Where they're like dropping, like, what are you looking for?
Well, more of the like specific like interjection into role playing elements, not so much the mechanics.
Okay. Probably like really any of your shoot. I'm drawing a massive blank.
That's all right.
I had an answer, and then like The Expanse. I finished season 4 of that recently. Like all of a sudden, you interject things like someone, took someone hostage, someone did something, so an old prejudice came up. Maybe someone knew someone secretly, or someone's gonna throw cloaked asteroids at you, or so that like a show like that, it has a lot of turns in it, or like Westworld, or your Game of Thrones. Because like I think would be like if you could orchestrate where all of a sudden the chat kind of working with the DM could create something like the Red Wedding, that would go down in Twitch history.
Yeah,
That'd be crazy.
That would be insane.
I don't know how you do that, but that'd be crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do that, but that's like kind of the pipe
Holy
dream,
Grail.
the Holy Grail, or Twitch chat becomes Cersei in that season 6 episode where she blows up the Sept, where you're like, the chat starts to work together, and then a weird dynamic comes. I think there's some interesting social dynamics at play there as well that I think we're only just starting to kind of scratch at.
Well, even if you had something as simple as like there are warring nations, they're in a battle, what's the outcome going to be? Well, as a DM, maybe I haven't picked an outcome. Toss that to fan interaction, like which side's going to win.
Yeah.
Look at the vote, see how it comes out, and kind of if it's close, then it's like a close battle. If it's not, it's a landslide.
Yeah.
Something like that could be easy to do, but the Red Wedding would be so hard to pull off.
But it would be.
Oh, it's so good.
It would be amazing, though.
I feel like the only way the Red Wedding happens is if the DM wasn't aware of what the chat was going to do either, and the chat just was like, "Kill them all," and just made it happen. Basically,
and threw enough
the
money.
DM's just like, "And you all get killed," and this person walks off into the sunset, and there you go. Like that's the only way I think that can go down. Like,
the chat throws enough money to
just
Yeah.
They pulled a Georgie. That's what they did. They pulled a Georgie and made it happen.
But
if Matt's still watching, he knows what I'm talking about. He'll.
So I think that's the future of at least some games. They'll be designed with streaming heavily in mind, and I would not be surprised if whenever either 5.5 or 6e rolls out, there's a lot of stuff with streaming built into it.
Yeah, I think they should. If they don't, it'll be a missed opportunity. And I think there's enough of us, all trying to get into this area and trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, what appeals to us as players versus what appeals to an audience, and like how to balance those issues that I'm sure there are bigwigs out there somewhere doing research on it.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it just is a matter of how much ownership the GM and the players want of their narrative. And that's really the struggle. If you're used to having complete control of your narrative, finding ways to turn that back to whatever random person shows up with 1,000 bits to throw down. Yeah. Like you gotta, once you put it out there, you have to honor it. You gotta, and you can't just like take it and kind of like, half-ass it. Like,
you got to roll with it.
You got to roll with it, and that's what I was joking about Georgie is one of my players in my Zweihander game. He rolled into our Zweihander game on Grim and Perilous the other night and just started lobbing misfortune coins at Matt. And Matt was kind of forced to use them. Like he's like, he can't not use them. They're paying money to have it happen. So characters are almost all but retired. Some of them, like it happens, So
you got to
go ahead.
Yeah, and that's always the struggle as a GM is letting even some of your narrative control go. Because when I started it first, I was like, I'm going to homebrew a campaign. I've written novels. I can do this. And I was like, but I don't want to. I was like, oh no, I got very possessive and I couldn't cede control. And then I switched to just running published adventures. Because, I don't give a fuck if they ruin this narrative that Chris Perkins wrote. I don't have the same ownership over it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a long time to evolve to be like, okay, I don't own this narrative.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not possessive about a story, a game is not where it needs to be.
Right. 100%.
So as somebody who's written some modules that are currently being played on some channels, do you feel the same way then?
No, because those stories I conceived knowing I didn't own. I wrote them. There's a structure for a story, but I know as soon as someone buys it and starts playing it, it's not my story anymore.
Right.
It's their story. I have just created some of the pieces of it, and I've given it to them to do as they want.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, that as a creator took a long time to get over.
Right.
You have to kind of get over the narcissism of, I'm the author and what I say goes. It's like, no, if you want to do that, go do straight narrative.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing a game, you cannot worry that someone might mess it up. And if your narrative is so rickety that it can't take player interaction, then it's not you haven't written a good module.
Yeah, that's got to be a hell of a difficult task to do. Now, when you've been on the streams and you've been watching your own streams, it sounds like you may have done that a couple times. Have you ever come across one that like just went completely different direction, different tone, different style than you expected?
I've seen one because it had to get compressed for time because they're like it's a one shot. We only have the 3 hours, and it took them took them a long time. And it was interesting to watch how the DM compressed the back end of the adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been watching Matt, who sticks pretty solid to the adventure, which is good, because the players have bought in enough that they're following the hooks he's dropping.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it lets me know that I've communicated the adventure correctly, because the DM's able to drop the hints and the players are grabbing them and going, got it.
Right. That's definitely been some of my struggle writing mine. Because info game I'm trying to write to a module, and every time I go into it, I'm like, yeah, but I made these decisions based on the characters I have.
Yeah, and
if I give this to another GM, especially with a system like Zweihander, they can have completely different characters. Like, where do I go from there? What is a DM going to do if they don't have a caster in this setting? Like, I got to try to keep all that sort of stuff in mind. And so for me, like, I feel like I'm not authoring enough. I'm doing the opposite. Like, I'm not authoring enough. I'm not writing my story down. I'm writing and ifs, ands, and buts statements too much, I feel like. So I got to figure that out. Like, so do you have that problem either? Like,
at first, it was like, I was trying to kind of plan for too many contingencies. And you just have to be like, no, this is the thing. And then it goes in this way. And this is some ideas. But there's no way you can write every contingency. So just kind of put down one or two that seem very logical. And usually players fall into those. And the DM will see that they've got that, and then they can kind of roll it too. You just have to trust that the players have bought in, and then kind of just give them everything they need. And sometimes a caster is going to break the story because they have a spell that you didn't think about or you forgot about. And that's like, writing high-level D&D is terrifying because
for sure.
I don't know how you do it.
Well, because it's like, a single spell can mess everything up.
Give everything spell resistance, right? So that they all have a chance at working right still.
Yeah, but
even that doesn't do it.
When you're doing a conspiracy or a mystery, just lay the pieces out, and the players will figure it out. The DM will get it if it's clear the DM can run it, and the players will figure it out. Like on Sunday, there were paintings downstairs that had names under them, and then there was a book that had generations of land grants. And I was like, I really hope that players interact with looking through a book for more than 5 minutes to do this little bit of research to start getting all the puzzles, and they did. And that was both to how Matt presented it, and because it was clear enough that they're like names, got it. Like, so you just have to don't overcomplicate things. Just be simple, because your players will overcomplicate it themselves, because they're always their worst enemy.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing we've touched on a few times in recent discussions, that what's obvious and clear to the person running the game who's looking at all the pieces is not always obvious and clear to the players. And sometimes you dumb things down too much, and that's another easy thing to do, is to say, well, let's go the other direction and just spell it out, and then the players are looking at it like, well, obviously, okay, which here, I'll take the thing you just handed me, put it in that key that you're pointing at. Like, let's go. So it's a tough balance. But I think for the module thing, like, I think if you're running a module where you need a certain person to play a certain class or have a certain ability, that's a module that's automatically going to go tits up.
It's going to fail 90% of the time.
There was a point in, I was running Dragon Heist, where it assumes you're going to go and talk to a dead person. Like, it assumes that you, the characters, are going to know we should talk, we should cast Speak with Dead. It's like, well, what if I don't have someone? And it tells you, like, well, you can go and find someone. I was like, that's a lot. And so I was like, my players are not going to immediately come to this. So I immediately I took that gauntlet that lets you speak with the dead from Torchwood, if anyone's familiar with that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to introduce this item that the guards have, and they ask the players to go interview this person with this dangerous magic item. And then, of course, the spirit of the guy went into someone's head because it's a cursed magic item. And then it was a way for me to then drop plot points that the book didn't easily have drop points for.
If your narrative needs a certain event to occur, never put it behind a skill check, never put it behind some kind of ability, bottleneck. Like I said earlier, don't invite a die roll unless you want both options to be okay. If you need something to happen, make it happen.
And if you want that, like, still that player agency where they roll, as the writer, have a this is what happens when it succeeds, this is what happens when it fails. Both of them get you forward progression.
Fail forward sort of a way. What I do to give agency back is if I have those situations, I reward a person who has picked certain things on their character sheet. Whoever has the highest passive perception, whoever has the highest insight, I reward those players for having made those choices. It's based off of their agency, not necessarily the role. Just their decisions and who their character is helps me determine in those situations where I have to have something happen. Here's who it happens to first, or here's who finds it first. Now see what they do with it. And that's how I approach those kind of situations. But
and anything when I know I need it to happen, I try to have a backup plan if the role doesn't work. Because you should always, a role shouldn't cause plot to not happen.
Sure.
And the idea of failing forward is a great idea, because a lot of times people are like, oh, I failed. And they get frustrated, like, well, I'm never going to figure this out. And it's like, well, no, I've got a plan. Trust that you're going to get something, and you'll get a nugget that'll help you.
Yeah. And don't give up on it either. Just don't give up on it. Like, let them sit there, let them keep playing with it a bit, give them other avenues, other types of roles, like, things that maybe aren't written in a module. Just play with it till they get it, and then run with it.
Well, I think it's the other thing about modules. Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it's the thing about modules, though, is that, you do have to plan for some contingencies, but at the end of the day, you have a DM that's running it. They know their group, they know their players, and they can change what's happening in the module to accommodate what's happening, or at least they should, So at the end of the day, maybe you don't need to account for all this stuff, Yeah.
The only time, like, you really need to start accounting for spells and whatnot is if, like, you're writing a puzzle box dungeon. Because then you've got to account for that when you're designing your puzzles. Like, we ran Tomb of Annihilation, and there's a lot of points where they're like at the beginning, they're like, these spells don't work in the tomb. And they're like, so the designers are like, you know what? These spells break puzzles. You can't have them, period. They just don't work. And then like the inside you're reading the puzzle and it's like, well, here's how you deal with if you've got spider climb or this or that. So like you have to take those into consideration there. But other times it's like spells happen, people kill people that they don't, and you don't intend them to kill. Things happen. And
now, as a writer, let me ask you this. Well, someone told us recently, and I can't remember if it was our guest last week or a couple weeks ago, said that the 5e modules are basically written with the understanding that you're going to read the entire module first.
That was last
before
week.
you ever start running it, and then start running it so that you fully understand the end game and everything from the get-go, because otherwise you are going to make mistakes, is basically kind of what our guest had said. It was it last week? Was it Hans Cummings that said that last week? Yeah, right.
Yep.
yeah,
So,
I would agree with that.
do you feel, as someone who writes module content, that that's something you take into account, that maybe the GMs they're going to read it in chapters as they move along?
Yeah, that's what I try to do. Is I assume as the GM that you're reading it in chunks with your players. Like, yeah, I assume you've probably skimmed the whole adventure. And also I write episodics, which helps. I assume you've skimmed the whole thing. And then for like a long campaign, I assume that you've at least read the whole chapter that your characters are in. So if you're in chapter 1, I assume you, the DM, have at least read all of chapter 1. And for a campaign, I think there should be a summary at the beginning. So the DM, even if they haven't read the whole book, has an idea of where the campaign goes. Like Storm King's Thunder has a really good it's got a flow chart right at the beginning. It's like, this leads to this, leads to these, leads to these. So even if you haven't read the whole thing, the DM kind of see how the flow of the adventure goes.
Yeah, that's a must.
Module should be written so that as long as you've skimmed it, you should be able to run it based on what's there quickly.
Right.
Monsters should be there. Important things should be in bold. Tables should be where you need them. I love putting character NPC dialogue into adventures, because sometimes the GM needs just like a line. You know, you can pop out that 1 or 2 lines, and it helps you immediately know how that NPC acts, feels, and talks. And you've got something to read if you have a brain fart.
Yep. Yeah, even if they don't actually use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to get in the head of the character that way. You know, it's more organic that way. Yeah, there's a lot to consider when you're writing these things. You know, there's an art to it.
And I've been constantly changing. Like, if you were to pick up Missing in Mullensburg, and then, which I put out a year ago, and then Courts of Quinlanwald, which is the 4th part, which came out like 3 weeks ago, you can see the design philosophy has evolved over the course of a year.
As you've learned.
As I've learned, and as I've gotten a feel for, writing something big and the system. And so you can feel like the progression, where it's like, I'm more confident that, okay, players are going to pick this up. I've got a better feel for how to introduce NPCs and how to give DMs what they need to really bring that character to life, and enough background that they're not just having to read a novel's worth of lore either.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than, consult the lore chapter. I was like, no, put the lore that I need for this moment needs to be right here.
Rehash it slightly just to remind, because if you should have already read it once, just rehash it enough to remind them what's there, right? And then move on.
Because soon as... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to throw something in chat here, to get some chat interaction. A lot of you guys probably do play modules, or in the market to get modules, or are interested in writing modules. So what are some things that you've noticed in the modules you've looked at that have been problematic for you that maybe designers need to focus on? And what things have been particularly useful to you that you think needs to be included in more modules that aren't currently? And I guess my question for you would be, like, what are some specific examples of things that you've actually changed in your design?
I know I put way more like bold text places. I use more lists now than I used to. like as sometimes it'll be like, well, I'll design this chase through this area, and it's like, or you could just put a list of like 5 things that could happen that are like 2 or 3 sentences, and they're super evocative, and then the DM is going to be able to use that how they want. You're giving them a toolbox. It's a story with tools, and you're not writing a novel that has stat blocks.
Right.
Because if I wanted to write Game of Thrones where I stat out every character, and that's it, it's just walls of text, and then I've got a stat block for Jaime Lannister in the back, that's not a fun module. That module will not be usable or useful.
Right. Yeah.
Because the DM's going to read it and go, that was great. Like when I read Dragon Heist the first time, I was like, yes, this is going to be awesome. I had a fun time reading it. I burned through the whole book in a weekend. I was like, this is going to be great. And then I sat down to start prepping it and then run it. I was like, fuck, there is no wiggle room on these tracks.
Right.
I've just read an interesting choose your own adventure novel.
Yeah. That's what everyone who's ran it has told me. I've watched a few people that have ran it that have basically kind of said the same thing. And the interesting part with Dragon Heist is there's literally 4 different versions of it in that book, and they're all that way.
They're all that way.
They're all that way. Doesn't matter which one of the 4 paths you take. That is your fate for the whole book. Is that it's exactly like that. Like
there's not one that is better constructed than the other. They're all janky because they tried to put too much choice in. You're more than likely not going to rerun a module once you've run it. So you don't need 4 branching paths and that are that big. Like a little bit of branching here or there, or like we're traveling, so here's a table of like 5 random things that can happen. Those you're not wasting your energy and the DM's energy by creating. But if you have 4 versions of the adventure, you are wasting time.
Yeah, I think in their case for that though, it's about tournament style. You're coming in for Adventurers League or something. So having the multiple, so that just got brought up in the chat actually. So good minds think alike there. But I think that's specifically what that was for, is trying to tie into those things in the same way we're talking about tying into streaming and stuff. Maybe it was
very interesting streaming because I saw 3 different channels running at the same time, and they were on 3 different paths. And it was like the 3 different modules completely, but they were all had the same name, and they were all technically in the same place with some of the same NPCs. Like, they were very different because there's and the 4 are done by seasons. There's a summer, winter, fall, spring. So it's that. But it was interesting to see 3 different people running it literally at the same time, and the stories were just wildly different because of which paths they were on.
Yeah, and that's cool, but I think. There's probably a better way to have presented it, because I think none, as the designers didn't get a chance to put enough thought and care into one path.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's like it would almost been better if they'd have had like 4 different teams working on each one, and not necessarily one person trying to divide creative ability to be, or over like 4 different possibilities.
Yeah, I don't know how they separated the workload, but it's an interesting module to really dissect, because it's like I learned a lot as a writer by reading and running that. Whereas if you look at, say, Curse of Strahd, it has the same. It's very open, but there's not a lot of unused pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, it gives you. I think Strahd, from what I've seen of it, gives you this sense of open, but it does a pretty good job of directing you to the next tentpole thing you got to go to. Like, it doesn't really leave it up to. From what I've noticed, it doesn't make it very ambiguous. It's pretty much like, hey, here's where it'll like name drop things. Pretty much like, here's where you got to go. Like,
it's open in the way like. Some video games are open where they're like, we have a huge open world, and like those are just side quests, and half of them are locked, and they'll unlock as I move, and I can see the plot, and then I see window dressing that's cool, that there's enough that the DM can really expand if they want, or you can just play it.
Yeah.
So,
you know what it strikes me as? It strikes me as like the way a Legend of Zelda video game's written, where it's like NPC chat comes up and there's one word in the highlighted yellow, and you're like, I guess that's where we're going.
yeah,
that's kind of how it feels to me. But yet, then it lets you run around wherever you want to till you get there. But eventually, you got to go there. Like,
yeah. And
did we lose your mic again? We did. We lost Jeff's mic again. Hashtag Jeff's mic sucks.
Listening to what I was saying.
Well,
there,
I think you got
it.
That explains why nobody was answering what I was asking.
Because no one could hear you, my friend. But I saw your mouse start moving. I was like, oh, we've lost him again. So.
Well, what I was saying is, there's a conversation piece about railroading and, modules being kind of prone to that. And in this kind of discussion you're talking about where they're dropping specific nuggets to kind of keep people on there. It's really interesting when you're putting together a game. It's already a difficult thing to deal with, how much freedom versus how restrictive it should be. When you're doing a module and you don't even know who's going to be playing it, like that's got to be a hell of a difficult task. I'm not really sure, how do you tackle that?
You're kind of laying scaffolding around a party you don't know. So you're like, well, here's some events and here's how it's going to kind of lay out. You're just kind of giving an outline and tools to the GM. You're not saying, all right, well, you have to do A, then you have to do B, then you have to do C. You just you lay out your parts of the world that you need, and then you're like, okay, well, this is what's important. Here's some other stuff that's interesting, and then here's some ways you can get here. So that and then that allows you to have the freedom to go, okay, well, I know I've got a bunch of uneducated brawlers, so let's go, there's the violent path. I'll pull that, like, oh, I've got people who are going to go and do research, or there's spell typers. Okay, well, I can see there's some spell path there. So you think about it, but you don't you're not running track, you're laying kind of scaffolding.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, because I feel like that's a very good approach for game masters, storytellers, narrators that have experience, that can look at a module and say, okay, I'm gonna look at these pieces. I know where things eventually go. I'll weave it together my story. I wonder if that's an approach that works for newer DMs or people who are specifically looking for a module that tells them what to run. Yeah,
I think if you're writing a starter adventure, you're more you're doing more do this, because you've probably got an inexperienced GM and you've got new players. Or if you're writing a one-shot, if you know it's a one-shot, do not overcomplicate it with extraneous nonsense. Lay rail A, B, C, D. And if the players know they're playing a one-shot and intentionally are out there to fuck with the story, then they have not bought in to the idea. So one-shot is like a movie. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. They're strong, they're going to happen. You are on a much more curated adventure that session, because it's a one-shot. Whereas when you're writing a campaign, you get to be a little more open and kind of explore and fiddle and find things as you're writing.
I feel like kind of what the big difference for me is that in something like a one shot, you don't want to give any more detail than what you have to.
Yeah.
Because what you do is with more detail is you give the players then something else to focus on that's not important. They will gravitate to that thing guaranteed 99% of the time for no good reason. If you mention a horse trough at the beginning of your one shot, we will stick with that horse trough for 30 minutes doing something we shouldn't be and not getting down the road where we need to go. Like, so you just, sometimes less is more.
Yeah. Like a one shot should be 3,000 words. No more, no less. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make it too long. Because if it's too long, the GM might not read all of it. You get in, get out. It always takes longer to play than you think it does when you read it when you're writing it.
And explore systems.
Yeah,
explore the system so they get a little taste of it, and then you're good to go. And that's
because like when I'm doing a one shot, I look through the book and I'm like, all right, I want to build it around a chase, or I want to build it around a little mystery, or I pick something and then that or a monster, and that becomes the core of the adventure. And then everything else is in service of whatever that core piece is.
Now, we did a one shot here. I'm sorry, Dustin, but might have the same question. When we were playing this last time, were there any systems you wanted to highlight that we didn't actually touch on?
No, that was mostly let's get people talking in the saloon. Let's let them go out to do a thing. Let them interact with a thing. There were some plot threads that I didn't pull in because it's the first episode and like a multi-episode-y bit. But so like there were plot strings that I didn't let you guys pull.
Less is more.
Right, less is more. And like there were some NPCs and things, but like there was just the go out and do was that one. Whereas I've got another Pistolero adventure that's you're in a bar, it's Christmas, it's snowing, you're stuck, and everyone has a secret. And then
kind of hateful eight-ish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the hateful eight without all the awfulness that is the hateful eight.
I loved Hateful Eight though.
I did not like that movie.
Oh man.
But it was like all the things I don't like about Tarantino racked up to 11 for almost 3 hours.
It was racked up to 11. That
very
is for
intense.
sure.
Tarantino.
Yeah. And I like Tarantino. That movie I just bounced off of. But I like the idea of a bunch of people in one room.
Bottle episode, yeah.
Yeah, and so like they're not a party. Everyone has their own agenda because everyone has a secret, and all the secrets play back to each other. And so we ran that at PAX a few times, and that was fun because everyone. But I mean, immediately wrenches can be thrown real easy in that. It's real rickety because it has no structure, even as a one shot. Because you're just like, well, I've got bandits and I've got a couple of things that I know I can have happen. But if a player immediately rolls right to their secret, like, you killed my paw. And
cascades out of control from there.
Yeah, it can cascade out of control. Also, a pocket watch as a MacGuffin, very bad because people will describe their characters with pocket watches when you needed that to be important. And then all of a sudden you've got like 3 pocket watches and you're like, fuck.
Yeah, I could see that being problematic. Some mundane item that you don't think of as being something that's going to be reproduced by players, and then all of a sudden they do, and you're like a monocle or a whatever. Like
twice in a row, a pocket watch was what denoted that someone had killed someone else's brother, and another character described their character with a pocket watch.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, I need to pick something more distinct than a pocket watch. Because both times in a row, both playthroughs, someone did that. And then confusion happened, which is great because, it was RP and whatnot. And like you could see the person who knew they were the brother killer. They were like, I'm just going to slide away here. But it would be better for the adventure to not have that confusion.
Now, we played the game, and if people haven't seen it, there is a playback on our channel here. You can go back and look it on the videos. But just since we're kind of coming down to the last few minutes here, is there anything about your game that you really want to put out there for people to know about that sets it apart, what makes it special, something maybe we didn't touch on in that particular session that would be good for them to know?
I think one thing that sets it apart is that as the tagline is it's wild, not weird. Because a lot of times in the early playtest, people are like, well, what races can I play? Like, humans. Like, well, what kind of magic can I have? There is no magic. You're the Wild West. And it's just that it is designed for smaller campaigns that are more kind of cinematic. Like, go back to your movies as your touchstones and roll and play to that. It's not this like hyper realistic West. Just embrace the fun of hats and funny accents and roll with it. And that's really what I try to impart. It's fun, it's quick, and it's a nice palate cleanser from the fantasy.
Yeah. I could definitely see that.
You don't let it get too dark.
Right on.
Because it's the real world. So it's very easy for it to get dark in really uncomfortable ways real quick.
Yeah, that was a topic I intended to talk about, but I didn't get into it.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone who's familiar with the Western genre understands where some of the pitfalls in the Western genre can be, and you can very quickly and easily fall into them dealing with certain like minority groups and this, that, the other. So I mean, you can very quickly get into some issues there. And I would think that in the year 2020 by now, most GMs would be cognitive of that sort of thing going into a Western game, no matter what system they're playing.
Yeah, you would think. And there's a lot of people who just, I don't know, they see it as an excuse to play on awful tropes.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Well, that's why there's no Native Americans in the system, because like, I can't write this without it being tropey. And it's one of the things I want to do later when I've got some capital, is hire someone who knows that the culture to then develop that side of it. Because like, I can't do this without it being tropey. It's not my story to tell.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to end up with the Lone Ranger Tonto sort of deal.
Right.
You don't end up in that kind of a boat like that. You want to stay away from that sort of stuff completely.
It's easier to say, I'm not going to do it, own up to that I didn't do it, and then say, I want to do it later. Not me, but someone who should speak to it.
Now, is this something that's addressed in the book? Like in terms of like, okay.
That I
didn't even bring it up.
Didn't even bring it up.
Didn't even bring it up.
Because I was like, well, then it's still people. Then it looks weird. I think if I brought it up in text, so I just didn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it was intentional. It wasn't like a weird oversight.
If there's one thing I can ask for before we go off the air, though.
Okay.
If you ever do an expansion, can you please read about the Bone Wars and make a character trope off of that?
Bone Wars.
Freaking hilarious. It's a real story. It's paleontology when it first started. It's two gentlemen scholars that go out to the West and end up in this massive rivalry of blowing up each other's like campsites, stealing each other's bones, like robbing each other, and just running each other into bankruptcy. It's amazing.
Oh, that's
crazy.
That's getting researched.
The Bone Wars.
Oh, it's so good. I came across it on it was either like Drunk History or like one of those shows, but it's so good.
The stream went to crap.
Did it? It looks fine. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, there it goes.
I guess it's time to sign out.
I guess so.
Twitch made the decision.
The stream says we're done.
Well, okay. In that case, let's do our outros.
Let's get them done before this thing dies completely.
So we got a link for you for your product for the drive-through RPG over there. So if you saw that in the chat, make sure you click on it, give them a look, and see where that could take you. Are there any other places we might be able to find your content, your blogs, your writing?
You can, if you click my name on drive-through, you'll find both DM's Guild stuff and a lot of Zweihander stuff. I'm on Twitter, which is really where I exist. It's where you can find me. And because I don't have a blog, because I don't have time for that. So yeah, awesome. Twitter is really the best place to find me. It's at DamieSean, because I didn't take the time to care about my handle when I first started. I was just like, generate this for me, Twitter.
Perfect. And let's see, are there any products or anything you want to really highlight besides just the main one we've been playing?
Yeah, if you're looking for a horror game, you can get the In Between, which they're playing on Grim and Perilous on Sundays as a bundle for $6. It's a really good deal. And then I've got a long form campaign that's in 5 parts. The first 4 are out. It starts with Missing in Mullinsburg. Pick those up. They're awesome. And the 5th one should be out by around Valentine's Day. And that will take you from beginning to end of your characters, all 3 tiers of play.
Awesome.
It's like 191 pages so far, so it'll probably be like 220 when it's done. And that's like
good for Zweihander, right?
Yeah, those are both for Zweihander.
Both for Zweihander. So
Excellent. Well, that's great.
Yeah, and if you like the sidekicks from the new Essentials kit, check out the Friend Folio on DM's Guild to get a whole bunch of weird, cool, kooky sidekicks.
Nice.
And because it's called the Friend Folio, and that's a fun title.
Pretty good.
Yeah, and that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate you there. We're going to plug a few of our own things here. So if you are a viewer that's come along and you've missed some of our old content, or you want to go back and relive some of the old content, we do have a YouTube channel. There is a link down below in the panels. So if you scroll on down there, you'll find it, and you'll see all of our stuff, including what we just did tonight, put on there in a couple days. You can go back and watch to your heart's content. And we'll also be putting that spotlight of our episode of playing the game there on there as well soon. So I'll get that rolled in there in case you missed that. And let's see, who do we have coming up next week, Dustin? Put you on the spot. While he's looking that up.
The computer's being stupid for a second. Hold on.
Perfection. Yeah, we're getting the
next week is Tony from Audio Dungeon will be here.
If you're very cool.
I'm familiar with them. They do some really awesome D&D content, and we'll be talking with them next week.
Fantastic. So I'll be gone next week, so it'll be Dustin and somebody else popping in to take over the reins. Hopefully they'll do a better job than I do. And Dustin, where can we find you these days?
Man, where can't you find me these days? So sometimes you'll find me here at Tabletop to Keyboard. That's where you'll find me most of the time, playing all sorts of things. Everstorm this Saturday. That's where you'll find me next, I'm pretty sure. I think. Oh, wait, are we playing 7 Days to Die before then? Maybe?
We play tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, tomorrow, 7 Days to Die. Back here tomorrow, 7 Days to Die. We're starting that up. That's going to be a ton of fun. Then, again, this Saturday is Everstorm. We are beginning what I'm kind of loosely calling Season 2, but it's really just a continuation of where we have been. It's not like there's been a time lapse or anything. So you'll find me there as Levi takes the helm there and drives us through another session of Everstorm. Where my Terra and Treefell's Zweihander game, we are on a little bit of a hiatus because my next game session falls on a Thursday that I'm going to be in Vegas with my wife for a few days. So we're having a little getaway. So that next game then is like 4 weeks away. So it's going to be a while before the next chapter of Terra and Treefell drops. So you got some time to get caught up on those YouTube videos if you haven't seen it. They're all up there thanks to Jeff's hard work. So you can find all them up there. I've been making some appearances over on Smart Gamer Live where we've been talking video games, MMOs in particular. So you can find a few episodes there. I'm on Notorious DMG where we've been actually picking up some things lately and playing some. So
nice.
You're gonna see a lot of that coming up some too. I know we have some more of that coming down the pipe. And I've been asked to appear on a couple other streams, but I haven't solidified dates yet. So I'll get those out to you though when they come to fruition. So
all right, well, fantastic. So thank you all for coming. We should definitely also plug our stream team. So if you don't know our stream team, I believe we have a link for the stream team little command there. But we are associated with Airlaser in the chat here, and she does a wonderful variety show of multiple video games and just hilarity. We got Drunks and Dragons, who are just a hilarious time. If you can't get what they're about in the title alone, it's all in the name. And go in there, check it out. It's a riot. And then, of course, we have the Liching Hour, and he does a very interesting thing. He takes board games and single player things and narrativizes them on the spot. It is unbelievable. Yeah. So there's the links for you guys. Go check that stuff out. Make sure you pay them a little visit. And do we have anybody to raid tonight? Is there anyone we can jump into, or are we too late at night?
No, I mean, we got an option. I haven't really talked to him much. One of the new streams I've been kind of checking out a little bit. So Soul Bear RPG, we're going to drop in on those guys tonight because I feel like
All right. Well, let's get ready for that. Make sure you give them a good welcome when you get over there. Say that we said hello, and we'll be seeing you again soon.